Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. If you've clicked on this video, then you must be interested in hearing about aggro, combo, and control decks within the My Hero Academia card game. Now, I do have to say up front, this is an opinion video. This is more of a philosophy video. It's more about how I approach deck building than it is about actually trying to define archetypes or assign categories to any cards or characters. And I'll talk more on that later, but to sort of jump right into it, first we have to define aggro, combo, and control, right? Normally in most card games we associate aggro with offense and attacking, and a lot of times with consistency too. I would say that consistency is obviously like something you want for every deck. You want to consistently draw your combo pieces. You want to consistently see the correct answers. And it's more about the philosophy behind how our deck gets there, right? And without a turn-based resource system, and because of the way that attacks work, because it's not a permanent that's on the board, steadily bringing you to your goal, it can be hard to pinpoint the exact play styles behind them. So when we talk about aggro, we're talking about less interaction. We're talking about putting your opponent on a timer, right? We're talking about consistent threats. If you give your opponent multiple turns in which they don't have to defend, those are turns where they can sculpt. Those are turns where they can selectively choose, what they keep and things like that. So I think that when you talk aggro in this game, it's specifically not about the volume in which you attack. I think it is specifically about the quality of what you can do with each attack. And I'll talk more about that as we talk about specific characters. But combo decks, these function probably the most similarly to your draw one per turn, one resource per turn, your other card games. Combo decks obviously are trying to bring about a synergistic collective of cards that should ultimately win you the game, whether it's, on the spot with a win condition, or it's creating an engine or an amount of value that is insurmountable from your opponent. And we have the combo keyword in the game, and I don't think that strictly means that a combo deck in this game has to be playing combo attacks or have specific attack combos, right? There's other types of combo synergy. There's other combinations of cards that can bring you to a win condition. We hear the apathetic control, right? And that is a very powerful control combo. That is specifically the synergy of using apathetic to flip one of your opponent's foundations and then picking it back up. So, you have small combos of cards within the other archetypes, of course, because you want your cards to synergize. And I think that the combo in this game, the combo archetype, is closer to like a normal OTK strategy, because again, you want to bring you a victory immediately. And cards like Staff Strike, which are these big combo attacks that require the synergy of having foundations in your card pool and more weapon attacks to play after it, ignoring progressive difficulty, allowing you to extend very far, right? Like that looks like the way a normal aggro deck might operate, but it's all the different cards that come into it to make it a combo strategy. So I think combo is the hardest one to really identify, because a lot of times a good combo deck, a lot of the good decks I would consider combos where it's like you have to play this card into this card into this card, whether it's because it's a card like exploding instant explosive release, or long-lasting explosion, where they care specifically about what you play after them, or the actual combo keyword, which cares about what you play before them. That being said, our last archetype is control. This might be the most confusing one to come from Magic the Gathering or another card game. Control in this game, in the My Hero card game, has so many elements that you have to stay on top of, and it's so easily accessible that I would say every deck I've ever personally seen has at least some piece of control, and that's pretty normal. That's very normal to have, the one level of protection, the one level of interaction for your overall game plan, even in an aggro deck. But because of the resource symbols, system, that's so weird to say. Because of that, you have access. If you're just on the same symbol as a character with control elements like Nightwatch, it can be very easy to adapt them into your play style. Because so many effects in the game play both sides, offense and defense, you can erase offensively, right, to get rid of a defensive piece. You can erase defensively to stay alive. You can, use Nightwatch to defeat wall cling. So a lot of the open-ended effects, a lot of the effects are not strictly about numbers, can be seen as control pieces, and they can be used adequately no matter what the tempo or the speed of your deck is. And that's sort of the next topic I want to talk about, is that I don't think that these are strictly tied to the speed at which your deck plays. Kirishima can easily build 5 his first turn. Kirishima can easily build 5 his first turn, play a jab, build 1 in, and now he's ramped, he's ramped up. And if the rest of his cards are attacks, or he has attacks now to pick up, especially back before the erratas, things like that, he can go very long, very deep on you. He can all of a sudden look like an aggro deck immediately. Now, the same thing can be said for another 5 hand size with a lot of health. I think a lot of people assume that the high health makes it a defensive character, which is, very normal. We've been taught by a lot of media that high health and low options, low activity, I guess I'll say, is something that is generally seen for defensive characters, right? The character that stands still, they don't move, they have the shield, they're not doing a lot. But if you think about it, right, Nomu, if he draws 3 attacks and he doubles all of their damage, that can easily be as good as, someone who draws 6 attacks, right? So, and that's sort of the core element I'm talking about when I say it's, if you want to look at aggro, it's about what can you do with each and every single attack. Now, I've got some characters laid out here on the table. You may have noticed, I picked, I think what we've already classified for some characters. We've already classified what types are, right? We've got the aggro bird. He's got the big bonuses to his checks. He can add an additional card to his hand. He's like a fake 8 hand size character. And he can pump all of his attacks, right? Through Summon Dark Shadow and through himself. So he's got a lot of numbers, not a lot of real interaction with your opponent. And because of that check bonus, he can do a lot with a little. Being able to do a lot of damage with very few resources, that's going to increase the speed or the tempo of your deck, and that's going to allow you to look more like a traditional aggro deck, a traditional aggro character. Then we've got the combo kid, Denki Kaminari. He's got very powerful once per game, meaning that, with a lot of combo decks, if you interrupt their synergy, if you interrupt their combo while they're comboing off, typically they tend to lose all of their steam, all of their momentum. It can be very hard to recover, especially against a deck that is supposed to be playing quote unquote faster than them. But as a lot of you have probably experienced, Denki can combo off very early, right? Like the ability to clear your card pool can dramatically shift the rate at which you play cards, the amount of resources you can now utilize, right? So because our game doesn't have a turn-based resource system, it's very difficult to judge the speed at which a deck can play. And then last but not least, we've got the home roam teacher control. This is probably the number one recommended control character. People come in, they say, I want to play blue for Magic. I want to play control. I want to be a jerk. I want to say no to people. This is the most obvious choice, right? Erase is a card that says a lot of no on it. It says no to a lot of things. It says no in a lot of ways. Not just the sealing the foundation, not just preventing the character abilities, but it also has Breaker too. And Eraserhead also has something printed on him that is common amongst control decks, which is card advantage, right? Which is the drawing additional cards. Typically, that's because card draw is so powerful. It is gated behind more resources, behind, the actual card advantage is gated behind a later game strategy to make it more fair. But you'll also see decks that draw and discard or loot that can be, that's like the aggro version, right? Like you're not actually acquiring advantage. You're just seeing more consistency by picking and choosing what you want now and digging deeper through your deck. So he's got speed control on him. He's got card draw on him, and his signature card that you can pick up at any time pretty much is a classic control piece. And you can see he probably lost 1 health, 1 hit point because of that. And then we've got our six-handers, Ochako Uraraka. She's got a very powerful once per turn. She's got a very powerful enhanced commit, which essentially makes it once per turn as well. And you just have to sequence properly. And she, to me, is one of the most aggressive characters because she has the consistency of recursion. She has selective recursion, right? So you play your first attack, it goes to your momentum. You can now pick it up at any time. You can now play more cards because your card pool is clear. And you have the repetition, the redundancy that I think a lot of aggro decks want to see, right? Like the classic red deck wins is a lot of 1-drop 1/1s because it's very important to get your tempo going early. Ochako says, as soon as you have 2 attacks, you have a 3rd attack, right? As soon as you can, even if you just poke and they block it and it goes to your momentum, you can pick it up on their turn if they attack you, progress your game plan that way. So you still have, you have a consistent threat coming. And then you've got Momo, who would be combo all the way, right? She's all about a specific keyword, and the card type for assets. Those help set up her literal combo keywords, which is, still an easy way to identify it. It's just not the only way to identify a combo deck. She's got a very powerful once per turn. But I do think that this character plays out more like a control character, and I'll get into that a little bit after we finish with all the characters. But, she has like the best combo attack, right? She's got, or the highest, I guess, high roll, right? The highest payoff for a combo attack, which is card draw and the ability to essentially play more cards for free to break more rules. If you can keep chaining them, that is the game-ending scenario that she's looking for. And then we've got Aida, which for the six-handers, being able to steal the first enhance, his kit being able to end the enhance step, his kit having lots of speed hate in it. He's got a very powerful poke game, which is the kind of thing you might see with a lot of control decks. Like if you see blue-white Delver control, right? Like they just want to poke once with a little small creature every turn, and they want to deny you the ability to poke them back to stick anything on the board and prevent that constant poking. And so if I think six-hand, if I want to come up with the classic example, this is the six-hander I chose. There are other good examples. I think he just has the most classic, again, speed, if you will, for a control deck. Being able to just jam the +3 speed on a poke and then punish you for interacting with it. And then having the Recipro Burst win condition, that looks the most like a typical control win condition to me. And then we've got Nomu, and this is where things get kind of weird. Things get kind of muddy at the 5-hand size slot because additional health is not the best way to really gauge like the defense of a character or the balancing of a character. Additional health can go a long way, of course, once you get to you have to play an entire other attack, right? But I don't think you'll see too many characters, too many five-handers that'll have the same or more health than Nomu, only because his response can kind of guarantee that. But if you don't have defensive abilities that affect damage or that essentially force your opponent to play more attacks, you will see defensive abilities that help you block or defensive abilities that help mitigate that hand size on defense, like fourth kind. Fourth kind blocks, he responds, picks it back up. He's not like a six-hander, right? As long as we're playing defense. But at the same time, Ochako 2 is very much an aggressive character. She very much, everything rewards you for attacking in the game, and the five-handers really double down on that. They really double down on saying that your game plan is most progressed when you're attacking. You're going to force things out of your opponent's hand. Why? Because if you don't block this attack, Ochako's going to play it again. If you don't block this attack, you just actually took 2 attacks worth of damage from Nomu. And then we don't really have to talk about Kirishima. He was the best control example, but I'm sure plenty of people have, in the pre-errata days, dealt with I'm going to build 5, no cards in hand, no punishment because you can't attack on turn 1, then play jab, build a face down, build another face down, and you can essentially play a Tokoyami turn after that, right? You can, he's going to replace those foundations with other stuff. So the biggest takeaway I want you to have from this video, as long as it's getting already, the biggest thing I want you to take away from this video is your deck does in some way have to play both sides of the game. There have been successful decks, and this is all with the caveat that it could change with set design. They could design the game completely away from the things I'm talking about. Card games aren't really in a vacuum. They're always up to future set design. But for the most part, your opponent's going to have a turn. They're going to attack you, and you should have to defend against it, right? And so the number one takeaway from this is that I don't think you can build just a control deck. I don't think you can build just a aggro deck. You can, again, just the biggest card game is Magic, and the most experience that I have, most of my experience outside of universes and the My Hero card game over the last couple years has been Magic Arena, building decks over there. And, for an aggro deck in that game, it's very much, I'm going to put the creatures down. They are going to swing. This is a core element of the game. And you're in a position where it's very rare that blocking would help you. It's very rare, the way the deck is built, the way the cards are balanced, that, leaving the 1/1 up to block would even help you. And sometimes you do have to do that, right? Sometimes you do have to recognize, okay, what are the outs if I don't block my opponent's slightly bigger creature, if I don't chump block? So it's not that the elements are devoid of it. It's just that in this game, with the current set design, I think you'll see a lot of cards go both ways, and so you still have to be able to play a legitimate offense, right? Even if you're a heavy control deck, I think you're seeing Eraserheads not do well, not only because he doesn't have a way to deal with throws, but because he doesn't have the most airtight win condition. He doesn't necessarily do the reciprocal burst or any one thing better than other characters, other than put a bunch of speed on things. And so when we go back over these characters, right, and we can say, okay, Tokoyami is the aggro bird, but what is his best attack turn look like, right? He clearly has attacks that are better and more important than others, and he gets a free card every turn. He gets a free mid block every turn, and that block has an enhance on it that he can play to help him block, especially against flash attacks. We saw in the Ace Maneuvers Win-A-Box tournament that I ran on Saturday, in case you missed it, the Summon Dark Shadow enhance done preemptively during an attack that he wasn't planning to block because A, he gets the damage reduction from committing his character, and B, if his opponent, the Jiro, plays a flash attack after that, he can now, get +3 to his block, even if they put a bunch of speed on it that's uninteractable. He wouldn't get the opportunity during the flash attack, right? So it is still a two-way card. He still has synergy, which will only get better with set 2, where, he's got the card back-to-back, which is one of the few pieces of damage reduction in this game. And so when I think about that awesome Tokoyami turn 2, I think about how I can play so many attacks with so few foundations, right? Immediately I start to think, well, wait, what if I can defend with so few foundations? What if, if my offense is so good that I'm guaranteed almost to win the game as soon as I have Summon Dark Shadow Ruin, and then, whatever right combination of attacks, where my most damaging, most high speed attacks are. I start to look at the things that can help me survive to get to that point. Because of the control check system, it's hard to really talk about consistency, and I'm not a numbers guy. And so I know that, like, while you are more likely to, check the cards or self-mill the cards with Tokoyami, that having a bigger deck also means you're not necessarily going to draw them as fast. But if you can defend with additional cards because of that check bonus, that means you don't have to build as many, which means you can select better block mods to block better with, right? You can have the additional mid block to block with, and then you can essentially save those attacks that you otherwise would have had to block with while getting your build in, while getting those important staging area pieces into. Now all of a sudden I can sit back at my leisure, with the cards like Fulfilled My Duty, which is powerful on fire, cards like Super Regeneration on evil, or Apathetic, the aforementioned control piece, to stifle my opponent's ability to kill me. And then at any point in the game, my offense is top tier. At any point, instead of being able to go, oh wow, he played 4 really big attacks on turn 2, I can play 6 or 7 really big attacks on turn 5. And because that offense is so potent, and because the control check bonus will allow me in later turns to have even more resources available to pump my attacks, I don't have to commit my stronger and darknesses to pass checks, then all of a sudden this amazing aggro character, who can still always pop off turn 2 no matter pretty much how you build the deck, all of a sudden he gets rewarded immensely for being able to hold out, right? He gets rewarded immensely for surviving, but not because his damage goes up, not because he has a scaling mechanic the way that Todoroki does, but because simply being able to sculpt into your best possible hand is, a skill in any card game. And because we draw so many cards in this game, it happens a lot sooner than people think. And that's all I'm really going to say about there's clearly different combo strats, and again, that sounds almost like a combo strategy, when I say it, but it's the control elements that can play both sides of the board that allows you to assemble the combo that can be done on turn 2, right? So it's not just the speed of your deck, but it's like the philosophy of, what do I need to do right now? What do I need to do with the cards my deck has given me? Maybe my deck only gives me all my zero diffs, all my stronger and darkness, and so I know I really got to draw attacks next turn and leverage this extra damage pump my deck is giving me. Or maybe it's giving me all my 2 diffs. It's giving me my Fulfilled in battles. It's giving me my Apathetics, and now all of a sudden I'm not building as well. I need to use my check bonus because I'm not building as well to commit cards to pass block checks, right? And so it's a lot, and this is a lot of a set 1 kind of issue, but it's also a historical design philosophy for the game, right? That Fulfilled My Duty can be extremely beneficial on both attacks. It's very open-ended. It's why you see a lot of this attack, and why some rulings can get kind of weird with it. And then in the same vein, Denki Kaminari, right? He's got that big combo piece, and we already talked about how he can combo off turn two. And the best attack in the deck has to be Electric Jolt. It enables a once per game on any turn, pretty much. I think only Wall Cling and damage reduction really kind of stops it. And most of the damage reduction in the game requires something else to have happened. Either back-to-back needs an ally attack to have been put in the card pool. Resistance is the next attack. Creepy Realization requires many cards in the card pool. Planning ahead requires it to be at least your second attack. So as far as your first attack of a turn goes, as far as a safe poke goes, Electric Jolt has to be the best attack in the deck. And then the best way to use it, if you're familiar with Magic's mana system, with any mana system where you want to use it on your opponent's end step and then it comes right back to you, Electric Jolt tapping down a foundation during your opponent's turn means it's also not going to be ready during your turn. So he has strong control elements that are meant to not only help him secure games on offense, but help him survive to get to that point. And just using the Electric Jolt deals 1 damage to guarantee the once per game, is a mistake that I personally was making early on because it's such a unique kind of effect. It's such a integral part of its kit. They said you have to deal damage with a charge attack. Here's a charge attack that always deals damage. So realizing that, putting it in my momentum early and stifling my opponent's, staging area when they have so few options was really like sort of the way to play it. And so when I play Kaminari, I feel like I'm playing a control deck, but really I'm just waiting to get to my big, cool pop-off combo. And then Eraserhead, right? Eraserhead has, like we said, just like the epitome of control printed right on him. He's got card selection technically with picking up the erase to then seal things. The -2 speed for almost no cost is very frustrating. And then of course the drawing 2 additional cards to help us filter through our hand, picking up the erase, and then eventually we'll need to refill it. So when you see the decks that are actually played by Eraserhead, they're not the ones that are playing throws, typically. The tape swings, they're not the ones that are playing slow, grinding you out kind of attacks, and yet his gameplay ends up that way because he doesn't have a lot of great ways to pick up damage, right? He doesn't have the most succinct way, I'll say, to put damage on things. Late Riser requires him to be playing combo attacks, which not the most popular thing right now. Most of the attacks that people are gravitating towards are ones that reward you for putting speed on them, which makes sense because he put speed on everything. But he ends up sort of chipping away at you, right? He ends up doing 4 damage, 4 damage, 6 damage, 4 damage, 6 damage over and over until hopefully he has accrued the advantage to pop off with the Recipro Burst or to just grind you out from not having any ability to deal with the high speed of his attacks. So when you think of it that way, that sounds a lot more like a tempo or a mid-range deck rather than a control deck. His turns attacking look a lot more like an aggro turn where it's a lot of small threats that are costly to deal with. You can't spend your removal, bolting a 1/1, you're spending your removal on 1/1s doesn't feel great, right? It feels like you're spending, you're overkilling it. And so when you over commit to block an 8 high for 6, that's what's going to leave you open for the finisher attacks. That's what's going to leave you open for the attacks that he has been generating that value towards. And a lot of the times he's just trying to see if you'll flinch. He's trying to find out once you're willing to commit too much or once you're put in a situation where you have to, that's when the deck can really shine. So getting to that point, we have to look at like what control elements is he really using to get to that point besides simply just reducing speed and blocking everything. So while this is definitely the go-to example of control, You're not seeing a ton of results because the favoritism of attacking is just not rewarding his playstyle. There's too many things to control and interact with. You can only seal, you can only use a race to seal a foundation once per game. It removes itself with the enhance, right? And you have to chew through your hand to keep preventing your opponent from using the abilities on their characters. So they're naturally rewarded for going deep against you, and you already have a small life total. So I do think that when you build the Eraser Head deck, you have to consider that control doesn't lead you to one big win con in this format, at least, not typically in this game. There is no one big bomb you can put down late game unless you have accrued the resources from earlier aggression. Putting a bunch of momentum from tiny little attacks into the Recipro Burst is a good game plan. But there's so many things that will happen along the way to get there, and having only one interaction point against cards like You're So Obvious, like as soon as your opponent has 2 You're So Obvious down, you have to have 2 erases, or you have to have a cancel and a seal. And so, the longer it takes you to get there, the longer your opponent can draw their answers, which again, Tokoyami and these aggro decks can easily put a lot of these otherwise control pieces into their decks, and it doesn't actually hurt their synergy because it's still a resource, right? It's still something they can tap down to attack you with at worst. And then likewise with Ochako, this is probably the one where it doesn't really change, right? Like there's cool combos you can do with putting something into momentum, fast momentum, and as the game goes on and more fast momentum is printed, cards like Charged Up, cards like Wealthy Aspiration, cards like Home Run Comet that give you momentum essentially by cheating, by not dealing damage with an attack. You'll probably see more combo variants come out for her. And as more cards like Electric Jolt come out, you'll see her get access to, again, the two-way street of control pieces. But it's so hard to look at this character conceptually and see, look at her and see a control style deck. So this is the one where I don't think there's really like a baited expectation I have for you. I think this character is just really solid, really consistent, takes the attacking as advantageous design philosophy to the maximum, and pretty much only limits you on playing a keyword or a zone, which is very open-ended. And then Momo, we already talked about it. When she plays, she doesn't really, have the strongest pop-off combo. And you're doing so much control, you're doing so much defense whenever I play her in practice, because I have to, I don't get bonus build a lot of the time unless I get my Precious Lessons out, which is a 4-check, which means if I check it, I had to build more anyway, right? Like blowing one up to build one down, and there's only so many weapon foundations right now, you're going to fall behind at least some of the time while trying to block, having to remove a foundation. You're losing all of this tempo that it's so hard to play an actual control style. You have so much cost attached to what you're doing. And yet, when I make a Momo deck, it's like 100% defense because there's only so few cards I can use to combo off with. And until they print more cards like her, I think it's Create Bow Staff, where you can immediately add a foundation to your card pool and then build it down. If they add more like that, you could definitely see a Momo aggro deck. If you had a Precious Lesson down and a Create Bow Staff, you can add the weapon to the card pool, blow one up, +1 off the Precious Lesson, +1 off the, neutral off the Precious Lesson, then +1 off the build down, and so you can ramp and then attack faster and things like that. But I don't think that that's like a playstyle they really want to support from her. So it'll be interesting to see if she gets more replacement foundations like a Precious Lesson, if she gets more weapon foundations that maybe do something once they hit the stage, or do something in the card pool even. But for right now, because her synergies are so specific, it's hard to justify her being something, anything more than a true combo deck. It's so clear that she wants a powerful weapon to synergize with and to build up to, and that it would have to be a payoff, right? And then Aida can definitely kill you quickly. Being able to limit and punish interaction on attacks is super good for aggro, right? However, if you think about what can I do on every attack, if you think about what can I put into each attack, because it's just the once per turn, and because his other ability is only on your opponent's turn, the gravitation towards control seems normal. However, because you can get in there so quickly, you can get in there so easily with one really fast attack. I think there is builds for Aida that are very unexplored. And one of the things I'm going to probably edit in and pop up on the screen is instant explosive release is one of the funniest, one of the trickiest attacks currently in the game, I think. And I think Aida has this version of Aida has a lot of potential for using a card like that, especially early in a game, because not only is instant explosive release fast momentum, not only is it pretty unappealing to block, but it also buffs your next attack. So that's something that he really wants from his lineup, right? Is more damage. Like Heroic Lineage gives him the damage, Extend gives 2/2, Thruster Kick buffs its damage as long as you give it speed. So he's got like all these other cute little ways to get damage that Instant Explosive Release kind of fits into the gimmick really well, and it gives you that fast momentum for quicker Recipro bursts. So, again, these are all just blending together when we're trying to see, well, what can we do with making a aggro Aida deck? We end up more with like a combo strategy, right? So, or maybe not a strategy, but like a combo turn. And so, because your volume of plays on a turn is traditionally higher than a lot of card games in general, not just cards you play, but the number of abilities you activate with enhances and responses, and your leader's got 2 abilities that are active right now, and most of your foundations are going to have 2. I think that like you're obviously, you're going to put a lot of synergistic effects in at set 1, but it's the ability to pivot from one play style to another, which is typically considered mid-range because it's typically about what speed your deck plays at. But instead, now it's about what all can you do in one turn with the resources that you have. All right, and then we've got Nomu, right? Probably the best archetypal example of aggro I can think of. He's all about the damage pump and reducing yours to sort of enforce this race idea. He's probably only got to hit you 2 to 3 times, right? He's got to hit 7-handers 2, maybe 3 times. And he's got to hit 6-handers probably 3 times. And even the other 5-handers, 4 times at most. Unblocked attacks, of course, unblocked attacks. So when it comes down to it, he doesn't have a lot of interaction. The low amount of cards you see means that even if you put all this defense in your deck, if you put all these effects that we talk about in your deck, which you still will, don't get me wrong, it's not like forsake defense because of it, but because it's so less reliable, and so much of his payoff is from attacking, and because his payoff is so good regardless of what attack it is, You know, even a 3 diff is easier to play and probably has worse stats, but you know, it's so much safer to do, and you can do it so much earlier that 3 difficulty attack, you know, you don't have to play high difficulty. 3 diffs are still punching well above their weight because of his damage pump. So, you know, there's not, and you see in his kit, there's not a lot of ways for him to interact with the opponent. He does have apathetic, which is one of the best ways. And that's just like a perfect example of how the wide open resource system allows characters' kits to help each other, and allows you to round out your deck, right? It allows you to use apathetic as you need it, whether you need it to stop the offensive threat currently, or you need it to prevent the defensive threat to finish off the game. So this one, you know, you can put a whole bunch of defense in your deck, but it's going to have to be defense that aggro decks would really like. It's going to have to be defense that is not necessarily interactive, because I think of like blocking as like very interactive. You're spending a whole card from your hand, whereas super regeneration doesn't really require you to do anything. It just requires you to lose life, then you flip it and you get some back. So when you think about leveraging your card advantage and you think about the level that you have to interact with, Nomu wants to interact on 2 things and 2 things only: his damage and your life total. And that is aggro to the core. Next up, we have Ochako or Araka. I put her in the combo spot because she does have the -3 speed. She's got a little back and forth. But the coolest thing about her, at least, you know, again, philosophy from the deck building standpoint, is that you can put your opponent in situations where they really don't want to block an attack, or it's an attack that goes through. You know that picking it up and playing it again is gonna, you know, just sort of double that benefit, right? It's very rare, I think, for an opponent to just not block the first one and then let you play it again with a +2 to the check. I'm sure there's reasons to, especially depending on the stats of the first one, maybe had more speed or something, but because she gets that fake 6 for attacking, she gets that 6th card, she picks back up to play again. You know, it's still very much like a reward for offense. Even with the -3 speed, that doesn't immediately turn her into a defensive deck. It just gives her a payoff. It pays her back for being a 5-hander, right? It sort of offsets that. She doesn't have to build as much to block one of these attacks. That being said, the consistent +2 speed really helps, and you do want to be going really aggressive with her. But you can think of really cool combos with cards that buff your next attack, right? Like there's long-lasting explosion is the kind of thing where if it hits and you pick it back up and then you play it again, it just buffed itself, so it's probably gonna hit again, right? That's probably one of the nastier attacks to get hit by, because it's 7 speed for 6, and then you play it again, it's what, 7 for 9/8. So that's the kind of like little mini combos you're gonna see as a 5-hander. I don't think you could realistically pull off like a big staff strike combo, or I don't think you could pull off like summon Dark Shadow type of stuff, because she has to be ready for all of her other effects. So when it comes down to like card synergies for 5-handers, we're really looking for the immediate payoff. We're really looking for essentially 1-card combos, and Uraraka is like perfect for that. She's so good for Gale Force Punch is one of my favorite attacks in her. You know, if it deals and you pick it up and you play it again and you get its 5 damage onto itself for being a punch, like that is so sick to me. So this is like the kind of character that doesn't look like a combo strategy from another game, but very much I think fits that role in our game. And then lastly, again, I just had Kirishima here for the control piece, because, you know, it's like the other one is All Might, who I guess you could say with the extra card advantage early, he could be able to get more control pieces out, but he definitely fits more of like, to me, a combo strategy too. But just I don't know how you build this character. I really don't. I guess I've only thought like you put powerful on reverse throw and then hope that you played a bunch of other reverse throws or punches that give you momentum. Detroit into reverse throw. I guess I don't know. Someone tell me in the comments how to play this character. But so five-handers being control, generally not very reliable. So five-handers being control, generally not very reliable, right? You don't get to see the control pieces. You don't get to see the blocks normally. But Kirishima himself allowed him to offset that. I still think with the errata, he fits that role. With the errata, he still has sort of a plotting game plan. And so he's still very open-ended. You can still kind of go both ways with him. But I do think his ability to be aggressive, his ability with coordinated effort to stay on the beatdown has greatly been hampered. But he still makes for an awesomely consistent deck that can play control pieces, that can rebuy apathetic over and over and things like that. And so he still very much fits that role of like decks in this game have to be able to do both. You have to be able to interact with your opponent's cards in some way. If you're not, you have to be putting tons and tons of numbers on your attacks. You have to be putting an overwhelming amount of attacks out, one of the two, right? You have to have such a volume of stats or such a volume of card advantage of actual attacks to play that it overcomes your inability to interact. So when we talk about how to apply offense and defense, the thing that I look for the most, the thing that I think about the most is if I want to play an aggro deck, right? I want to look at what are the attacks that just have the best numbers. You ask, how do we apply offense in a control deck? You look at evasive attacks. You look at things like throws. You look at things like tape swinging, which is sort of like a throw. You look at electric jolt, which is something that gives you a benefit for later, even if you block it, even if you defend against it. Cards that progress your game plan defensively, like Hard Jab can be, picks up a block or just builds you an extra resource, things like that. So again, like cards that go both ways, it's so hard to answer that question when someone comes into the game, oh, I want to play aggro, or oh, I want to play control, because you can hand them these decks and you can tell them this is how you play this style. But at some point, they're going to be presented with situations where, it would at least be to their benefit, if they want to win more games. They're going to have to pay attention to those other elements. Some of my friends, who like Pokemon trading card game, or, they like Magic, a lot of the decks they like to play only on their turn. They like to be able to play out their turn, pass the turn to their opponent, and then mentally check out and just, say, what's the damage? Tell me what I'm taking. In this card game, if you want to think about it, right, negates, and I would maybe sealing, but mostly negates are like your counter spells. Night Watch is like the closest thing to a counter spell because it's preventing the ability from hitting. And I would consider blocks almost like removal. Now, we do have actual removal, like Evil Gaze, which removes actual permanents. So I don't want to get confused with that. But typically, when you use removal, in MTG, in Magic, you're removing creatures. The whole dies to removal thing doesn't typically apply to artifacts. Although now I'm sure it will. I'm sure someone will mention it. But so you typically we're removing the creatures that are going to deal combat damage to us and kill us. And so if you think of blocking as removal of the sources of damage, and you think of negates as your sort of counter spells, you can realize that every deck has blocks in it. Every deck has removal. And so if you just believe in the fact that your Tokoyami deck can play defense, if you believe in the fact that Nomu blocking one attack per game means their effective attack count goes from 7 to 8 that they need to kill him, right? The stupid 007 meme. Just blocking one attack completely literally forces your opponent to have a full additional attack, at least guaranteed in Nomu. But that's still relatively true, right? So defensively, you can build your deck to be 100% offensive. All the effects are offensive. All the things that you're going to enhance or respond with can be completely offensive, and yet you still have the ability to defend perfectly. If you have the right block zones, if you have the good enough block mods, it'll certainly be a lot harder. And with the current game design, it's almost impossible to not be taking some damage. It's almost impossible to play that perfect defensive game. But it's not the kind of game where you can sit down and say, I'm just gonna play on a curve and I'm just gonna swing everything sideways. You can just play every attack in your hand and just check fives and overwhelm the opponent and get there. I've seen plenty of froppy turns play out exactly like that. I've played plenty of games like that myself. But I think that when you build your deck, and especially as more cards come out, I want to do this while this is still true with set one, at least. Again, this is my philosophy. When I build the deck, I'm looking at how many effects can I use on both sides of the board typically. How many of my speed hate cards also help my offense? I love Specialist of Sound. It's a staple on all of its symbols. It's incredibly powerful, especially with more flash attacks coming in the next set. I can smell them. I know they're coming. There's got to be at least one for the Invisible Girl, right? So I look at the cards and I look at what cards can help me on both sides of the board. And right now with the limited card pool, I run both Specialist and You're So Obvious. But as more cards come out, you're really going to want to see, okay, which cards will help my game plan, and then you're also going to know that they're going to help prevent your opponent's game plan, and those are going to be the cards you're going to see, I think, the most on deck lists. Those are going to be the ones that are more reliable. It's almost like foundations that increase speed and damage, especially damage, are like combat tricks from Magic. It's almost like an equip spell, in other games. It's almost like an attachment in other games where it's risky in the sense that if your opponent can deal with the attack after that, right? Like if they block it, that's the removal. You committed that resource for nothing, right? So Heroic Lineage is one of the best because once you put speed on an attack, it becomes more reliable to put damage on. Just like if it's a throw, it's more reliable to put damage on. And so those are like the kind of effects that you'd want to see more in your control decks, is the reliable ways to put speed and damage on things, or attacks that are reliable with no investment, so you can save all of your effects for defense. And I think one of the beautiful parts of design for this game is that typically when I'm going in for the kill, I'm using up my defensive pieces too, whether I'm destroying them for self-sacrifice, whether I'm using Destined for mainstream to draw me an extra attack instead of making sure I check good on a block, whether it's flipping Wall Cling just to ready Froppy because I need the other cards in my stage face up for offense, and this is hopefully the last turn. So hopefully if you guys were trying to build a deck that fits your favorite archetype or your favorite style of play, and you were struggling to do so before, because I hate playing aggro. I actually hate playing aggro in a lot of card games. I think turning creatures sideways in Magic is uncouth. I think the battle damage step in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is completely pointless. And the funniest decks in Pokemon are actually the Mewtwo Mulligan deck and like the Mr. Mime Invisible Wall stall decks and Scoop Up and the damage swap decks. I played the worst card game decks. And so in this, in the small format that we have, I don't think you can really sell out one way or the other. I think that I've seen a lot of people really struggle with the game because they went, I want to play aggro, and someone handed them Tokoyami or someone handed them Froppy, and they never explained to them that in this game, aggro doesn't just mean attack every turn, do as much damage as you can, and then pass the turn. I don't think anyone explained to them that, like, a control deck that draws 5 attacks will still kill you, provided they check relatively well. If you leave yourself completely open, and the demo decks, the rival starters actually do a really good job of teaching this, because not only does Bakugo have good damage pump and good momentum payoffs, but Deku can deal half of Bakugo's life if he has no cards in hand with 1 attack. So yeah, I hope that this guy's helped you out just a little bit. This is kind of a rant I've been wanting to do for a while. Like I said, I was going to tie it into hand size, but I feel like it would be kind of confusing to go, this is the philosophy behind how to build certain hand sizes, and then kind of do like a whole discussion on how you can build decks either way that you want, and you kind of have to have all the different elements. Control and aggro decks have to have very synergistic attack lineups right now. They have to have incremental advantage from their other attacks, right? So it's definitely an open-ended game. It's an open-ended system, and it's not balanced around doing one thing really, really well. It's not balanced around waiting until you draw your big, huge boss creature that once that you're rewarded because you waited so long. You are rewarded for consistently playing the game. You are rewarded for putting things into motion, and almost more importantly, limiting the points at which your opponent can interact, choosing not to attack so that your opponent cannot progress their game plan, is something I think you're going to see a lot more of in the future. You got your first sort of taste with it with Kirishima. I think you're going to see more of it with characters that self-mill. Like Endeavor is probably going to be very happy to do things on your turn to fill up his discard pile and increase the options that he gets. I think the Tokoyami 2 dot will be fine with doing certain things on your turn, because he'll get to ready effects and use them multiple times. So, this game is all about how much can you move, how much can you do, how many abilities can you play, how many attacks can you block. And you're rewarded, like if you build 6 instead of 5, that's more cards you can play later, and the risk reward that comes along with that. So the next time you're sitting down to build a deck and you think, oh man, I really want to play aggro, or oh man, I really want to play control, don't be too sad that you have to put the other cards in your deck. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'm going to let the outro roll. Please give a like, share, subscribe. Let me know if you disagree. Let me know if you hate my guts in the comments. Any interaction with the YouTube algorithm is good at this point. So I'll see you all next time. Have a great one.